Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where it is time for another episode of Workbench Wednesday. And I hope you are having a great day wherever you are and whenever you happen to be watching this, whether it's Wednesday or not. Now today, rather than a show and tell where I talk about a piece of rolling stock or a model structure or a tool or something like that, today I want to talk about a specific model making technique, one that I personally find indispensable. So I've decided that on occasion, these Workbench Wednesday videos will take the place of the old quick tip videos I used to do, where we talk about a specific model building technique, method, or materials. And with that in mind, I asked in a recent build video if some of you might be interested in seeing an episode that was just about dry brushing. And I heard you loud and clear. A lot of you wanted to see that. So that's what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the subtle but indispensable art of dry brushing. So the first component in dry brushing is the brush itself. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. And I think where a lot of people might run into trouble and not get the results that they want, it's because they're using the wrong kind of brush. Craft store brushes, the ones you pick up in the craft department, for the most part, are going to be junk, for lack of a nicer way of putting it. They're just not going to give you the results you need. What you want are brushes from the art department. You want a semi-stiff brush. These are all, see how long the handles are? That's because these are oil painting brushes or acrylic painting brushes. You can use them with either medium, but these are the ones I prefer. These are semi-stiff brushes. You don't want a hog's bristle brush because those are going to be probably too stiff. So you want something that's semi, see how that has a spring? You push on it, springs back into shape. And the shapes I like, this is a filbert shape, which means it's semi-rounded on the top, kind of like a filbert nut. But mostly I use flats like this. And I have them in different shapes and sizes. And these are my go-to brushes for dry brushing. And the second component is going to be paint. And if you watch my videos, you know I prefer acrylic paints for this, for the most part. A lot of times with a model, you'll be working over an enamel-colored base. Something that's been primed with enamel or has the base color is going to be enamel, like a boxcar red, just as an example. But the dry brushing layers you're going to build up on top of that, you're going to probably want to use acrylic paints for that because then it won't react with the enamel paints underneath. It'll just sit on top. It won't thin the paint or react with it in any way. And the paints I like to use are usually these inexpensive craft paints or tube acrylic paints. And the reason I prefer these colors over say, these Vallejo model colors is because they're much thicker. And you want a thick paint when you're dry brushing. Thinner paints are harder to work with when you're dry brushing, and that's because they're going to sink back into the bristles of these brushes, and you're going to have more paint on here than you think, and it's going to mess things up. With a thick paint, you can just get a little dab, wipe most of it off, and you're going to be good to go. But I think the best way to show you this is with a demonstration. So let me find something we can dry brush, and we'll do that right now. In addition to the brushes and the paints, you also want to have some water for cleaning your brushes with, some paper towels standing by. I like to use a piece of corrugated cardboard, and this is primarily for getting most of the paint off of the brush before you start applying it to the model and testing how much paint is actually on there. You also might want a little dish or palette. I like to use old lids, obviously, for squirting color out and mixing color. And then for the model itself that you're going to be working on, it's important to pick something that has a lot of texture that you're going to be able to pick up with the dry brushing. This is one of these Bachmann side dump ore cars, and this just has the factory paint job on it. And it's got a lot of great, it's got some wood grain texture, it's got nuts and bolts and, you know, doodads and hardware all over it. If you have a model that's it's very smooth or has a glossy finish on it, dry brushing is not going to work very well. It's got to have some texture on it to catch that paint, to pick it up. So now here's one of these same cars that's been dry brushed. And again, that's just right over the factory paint job. I think I want this car to be a little darker. So I'm going to start with this really dark brown called Cafe Noir acrylic paint. So I just dipped it in there. I get a little bit out onto my palette right here, or my lid. And then I'm going to wipe most of it off with a paper towel. Paint is going to build up around here, around the ferrule, the top of the bristles, and it's really easy for that paint to come off of there and get on your model. So you only want paint on the very, very tip of the bristles. See, so just going to dip it straight down in there like that, and then do this. Wipe it back and forth on my cardboard until there's very little left, until it starts to look like this. You know, if there's one rule, it's better to have too little paint on the brush than too much. Another place where people get tripped up, I think, and don't get the results they want, is that there's too much paint on the brush, and they end up with streaks everywhere rather than the look they want. There's more on there than you think. See how I'm scrubbing it like that? And paint is still coming off that brush. So that's the paint you're going to want to be putting on your model. As far as picking colors, now I just chose this dark brown at random, but you want a color harmony, something that's going to be harmonious with the model that or the piece that you're dry brushing. Something that, at least for the first pass, you want something that's close in color to it. Harmonious means it's just going to be the color that's next to it on the color wheel, or very close to it on the color wheel. Now I'm going to go around this whole thing, and you're probably not going to see anything at first. But I am gradually darkening this whole thing. And again, the key to this is not having too much paint on the brush. If I had too much paint on the brush and going like this, I'd be getting streaks up here where I just want that to be hitting the tops of the texture. I'm glad you guys asked about this, because I've been meaning to get around to painting these cars for a long time. This gives me an excuse to do it. And you see the size of the brush I chose for this too. See that? I did not choose this brush. This one is too small. If I just wanted to do these iron straps here, this is a brush I might choose. But if I want to do the entire car, I want a bigger brush. This one's about 1/2 inch. For my next color, take some of this apple barrel territorial beige, which again is a harmonious color. You just want it on the very tips of your brush. This is also one of the reasons you want to use a flat brush. It's a lot easier to control the amount of paint and make sure that there's you just have it on the tips of the bristles. A lot harder to do that with a round brush. Just going over that wood grain, and that's going to start to bring out some of that detail. Sometimes I'll just use the heel of my hand. You might see me do this in build videos where I'm just, using the heel of my hand, because I can tell by the feel how much paint I have, how wet it is. So it's all about controlling that. It's all about controlling how much moisture there is in the paint, how wet the paint is. That's why it's called dry brushing. Now say I want the bottom of this car to look worn, which I do. Go like this against the grain. The grain is going this way on these boards. Don't get impatient and think, oh, I need more paint on there. You don't. So we're just building this up subtly. We didn't go immediately to a much lighter shade. And the general rule of thumb is you need about 3 colors at least for something like this, for it to be convincing. So it's all about patience and building it up in subtle layers. Subtle. Can't stress that enough. The next shade, I think we're going to use some khaki. See, that's a couple shades lighter again. Same thing. Get 99.9% of that paint off the brush. These cars are going to get real, and you got to think about, where a car like this gets dirty. Where is it going to show wear and tear? Well, this is a side dump ore car, so it's going to get real dirty down here. I'm using two different motions. One is just like this, and then when I really want to get more color on there, use kind of a swirling motion like this. I'll do that down in places where I want there to be a lot of wear and tear. So I guess the most important thing to remember is to always know how much paint there is on your brush before you put it on the model. And that's why this cardboard is here. So I will always know, or the heel of my hand. Go back to those inner boards where I want it to look like the paint has worn away. So I'm doing the swirling. Start to get that look. So we have three colors on there now, and that's looking pretty good. But I'm going to go for one more. Go with some of this granite gray and a smaller brush. And you can just bring it down like this and add little streaks. Just one shade lighter than the last color. And with this little brush, I'm using kind of a third technique rather than going against the grain or swirling. I'm just kind of stabbing down, which will leave tiny little flecks of paint here and there where I want it to look like all the paint has been worn off of these boards. You take one more pass down here on the trucks with some pavement, which is very similar to grimy black, just to give a look of grease and grime down here, especially around these journal boxes. See, look at how much paint was still on these so-called dry brushes. There's always more on there than you think. With the dry brushing done, I'll show you. This is one of my secret weapons. I'll go back over everything now with a dark wash. There's almost no model like this that can't be improved upon with a dark wash. And this is just diluted black, just mostly water. But you can see how it soaks back into that grain. Just adds another layer of realism on top of the dry brushing. And the dry brushing continues to show through, you see. Just don't want to let this pool up, and just keep the brush moving. And for this, you do want to use a round brush, by the way. A little bonus technique today. I'm going to add some numbers to the car using some Woodland Scenics dry transfers. And I like to put a piece of Scotch tape, cut the individual letters or numbers out, put a piece of Scotch tape over the top, and then you can position it exactly where you want it. Then I use a soft lead number 2 pencil and just go over the whole number or letter to transfer it. Let's see how we did. Perfect. Car number 4. And those are the dry brushing techniques that I use most often. That's what works best for me. If you have a technique that works well for you and I didn't talk about it today, you can put it in the comments down below. But just to review, brushes. You want to use higher quality artist brushes rather than craft store brushes. And you want ones with a square shape and semi-stiff bristles. Number 2, paint. Thicker paint is easier to dry brush with than thinner paint. and I prefer inexpensive craft acrylics for this. 3, use harmonious colors, colors that are just slightly lighter than the base coat that you're working with, and work from the darkest color towards the lightest color. 4, always be aware of how much paint is on your brush. Too little paint is better than too much, and work it up in small incremental layers. And that's it. I want to thank you all for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell if you want to see more from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow Thunder Mesa over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and find all that's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. Of course, if you really enjoy what we're doing here at the channel and want to show your support, you can do what these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.